Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be taking you through how I'm going to be putting together my new pedal board. I've had a pedal board put together for a while now. It's kind of been used for testing out what I really like in pedals and kind of advancing how I put together my pedal board. Some of the things that I've been experimenting with are junction boxes, so that way cables can go in and out of the same spot on the board. And I've been experimenting with some power supplies and different ways of powering things. The thing I'm going to try to do with this is set it up so I make my own power cables for it using a method I've seen from Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects. I'm going to be using his method of doing it. And there are just certain things I want to try to achieve with this board, like portability and space saving, and fitting it in a specific case. And I'm going to take you through the process and show you some of the highlights of that. So thank you. So the first thing that I've done here is I've laid out things in the approximate location that they're going to be. An important thing with pedal boards is that switches are easily accessible, that you minimize the chance that you will run your foot into a switch that you're not trying to hit. So everything here seems like it's going to be a relatively good distance apart from each other. The switch on every one of these pedals is in a pretty good location as far as where it's laid out on the pedal, so there's plenty of room between each to hit them. Now these pedals up here for me are going to be left on majority of the time. The only switch that's going to be actively used is the reverb select on the headroom. It's going to be left on probably 99% of the time, and the Deluxe Memory Man is probably going to be on 100% of the time if it's being used in the wet-dry setting that I'm trying to go for here, because with the Deluxe Memory Man, it flips phase when you turn it on and off. So if you're using 2 amps, the switch in the phase will change the sound drastically, and I do not want that to happen. So it's going to stay on most of the time. The only time this will probably come on and off is if I'm using a single amp rig. All the delay or all of the ambience control is probably going to be used between the two settings on the headroom. Everything else, there's 2 gain stages. I'm settled on the Blues Driver from Boss, just the regular Blues Driver, not the Waza, and the Warm Audio Centavo, which is a Klon pedal, and the Stereo Chorus. So this is doing all of the split for the wet dry. It's not a true wet dry, because if it was wet dry there wouldn't be any, stereo-ness about it, if that's a word. And the control for the phase and the ground lift is a radial ABY switch here. So this will allow me to lift the ground as isolation controls, and I can flip the polarity. Now normally you would use this in a spot where you could toggle between amps. That's not what I'm using it for. If I was going to really go all out with this, which will probably happen eventually, I'd go with the Gig Rig Humdinger. Basically do the same job without the switches. And for power, and all of this is underneath of the board. By the way, I'll show you that in a little bit. I'm using the Gator Power 12 isolated power supply for everything. And the junction box is an American Loopers 6-way junction box. So that pretty much covers all of the peripherals for this. I'm going to be using 3M Dual Lock to be anchoring everything down, because I think this is going to be a pretty consistent board, trying not to change around things so much. It's kind of why I've done so much experimentation with things. So hopefully this stays the same for a while. The board's custom. My grandfather and I made it. It's pretty simple, but very robust. So we'll get into it. Okay, now that I have dual lock on the bottom of all the pedals on the first row, I've just kind of checked to make sure that the stereo chorus is going to fit next to the blues driver, because it's going to have to be oriented sideways in order to facilitate the jacks being on the side. It's just going to help save room, and if it were to be sideways, I wouldn't be able to fit these pedals on the bottom row here. So now that I've gotten all that checked out, I'm going to move to the inside of the board here. Now that I've got the phone off of the tripod, you can kind of see what we're working with here as far as the kind of the heart of the pedal board here. Here's the Gator power supply here. There's a cutout on the side trying to get to the power if need be. And on the back here, spin this around. There's an AC outlet here. Here's a better view of the Big Shot ABY. It's actually going to be flipped around inside of there to get it to where it's butted up against the power supply as close as possible. And here's the junction box. Everything from the stereo chorus is going to be coming up to here. And there'll be an input on the side over here, as there will be the cable for the guitar comes in. So now I'm going to get all this tightened down here. I'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so I got the majority of the power going to the pedals here. You can see there's not much excess. That's definitely the plus of not using the stock length for the cables. It's a lot less messy, and with all of these connections between the pedals going to be, relatively short, I'm not going to have to custom make any of them. And for the pedals at the top, I've already have long enough cables to get to them, and I will just use cable tie mounts to kind of tidy everything up. Same thing with the bottom if need be. I did run into a snag. I'm going to have to, or it's not really a snag, it's more of an oversight. I'm going to have to make a slot here at the top to run cables to the top here, just so I don't have cables hanging over the edges, getting snagged when it's coming out of the case. Just make me feel better, and it increases reliability of the board, just not having stuff getting snagged potentially and tearing stuff up. So I'm going to go ahead. I think it's been long enough for all the pedals with all the dual lock to kind of cure, so I'm going to go ahead and take some of them off and get a jigsaw and cut out a slot for this so I can fit some cables through there. Okay, here's the final product. This is what the board looks like, all said and done. Got my wiring running down through here, relatively tidy. I didn't want anything tied down too permanent yet, just in case there's something malfunctioning. When I get the board, plugged up through the rig. See back here. Turn around. I do have to use this wall wart for now for the Memory Man, because the power is kind of janky. I need to figure out a way to reverse the polarity and double the voltage. That'll come soon, hopefully by next week sometime. And we got everything going on down here. It's not the tidiest thing in the world, but I'm sure it'll change at some point, so it just makes it way easier to tear apart when that time comes. So I'm hoping next week sometime I'll get a video up of what this sounds like through my rig, so stay tuned for that. Thank you very much for watching. I'll be back next week.